The snow came sideways that morning, like the sky had decided to start over. The roads were white ribbons curling through the woods, and the old car coughed its last breath 3 miles past the town sign that nobody maintained anymore. Mara sat behind the wheel for a long moment, listening to the silence swallowing the engine. Her daughter, Eve, was asleep in the back seat, her small body bundled in thrift store layers, the air fogging lightly around her mouth. Mara watched it rise and vanish. Proof of life, fragile and rhythmic. She'd been driving without destination, guided by memory more than map. The only thing left to move toward was a place she had seen once as a girl, a gray stone mansion on a frozen hill, half hidden by pine trees, abandoned even then. She remembered thinking it looked like a house that had forgotten what warmth felt like. Now she thought maybe that made them even. Eve stirred. "Mom? Where are we?" Mara smiled the kind of smile that hides worry. "Somewhere we can stop for a while." They climbed out, boots sinking into snow that creaked like glass. The wind pushed at their coats, impatient. Beyond the tree line, the mansion stood just as she remembered. Massive, symmetrical, and silent. Windows dark. Roof bowed under decades of weather. The porch sagged as if tired of waiting for anyone to come home. "It's beautiful," Eve whispered, her breath rising in front of her face like smoke. Mara nodded. "Yeah, it is." They followed a narrow path buried under ice and found a service door around the back. The handle turned, stubborn but not locked. It opened with a sigh that felt almost human. Inside, the air was colder than outside, still, stale, untouched. Their footsteps echoed through a kitchen with hanging copper pans greened by time. A single chair lay on its side near the window. The house wasn't ruined, so much as paused. Everything looked mid-sentence. "Can we stay?" Eve asked. Mara hesitated. Every rational part of her said no. Trespassing, liability, danger. But reason hadn't kept them alive this long. Hope had, in its small, stupid way. "Just for tonight," she said. They explored room by room, guided by flashlight and instinct. Wallpaper peeled in strips like pages. A grand staircase climbed into shadows. In one corner, Mara found an old radiator under a boarded window and touched it. The metal freezing, but solid. She traced the pipes with her light until they vanished into the floor. Maybe, she thought, if there's still a line, there's still a chance. They settled in a small room upstairs. Eve curled under coats and a blanket of dust. Mara sat by the window, staring at the snow until it blurred into one long white breath. The house groaned occasionally, wood adjusting to cold. It sounded like it remembered being alive. In the morning, she began to explore the basement. Steps narrow, walls sweating damp. Her flashlight beam caught a hulking shape. The boiler. It stood like a sleeping animal, its metal belly streaked with rust, but intact. She checked the gauge. Empty. The pilot switch looked ancient, but not broken. "Okay," she whispered, voice echoing. "Let's see if you want to work." Outside, she found the gas meter buried under snow. The line was capped. The tag faded. Her father had been a maintenance man once, before the fighting, before he stopped answering calls. He'd taught her that most things could be coaxed back to life if you spoke to them gently. She brushed the snow away and turned the valve a quarter inch. Nothing exploded. A faint hiss rose, a shy admission of possibility. Back in the basement, she struck a match. The pilot flared, then settled into a trembling blue flame. The boiler coughed, metal contracting, expanding, rediscovering itself. A pulse ran up the pipes. Mara ran upstairs, heart pounding. She placed her hand on the old radiator. It was warming, slowly, honestly. "Eve," she called. "Come here." The girl ran barefoot into the hallway. "What's that sound?" "Heat," Mara said, laughing through tears she hadn't planned to have. "It's heat." They spent the rest of the day cleaning, her with a broom, Eve with curiosity. They opened curtains to let light touch the walls again. Mara washed grime from the windows until she could see the forest's reflection. When the sun came through, the house looked surprised. By evening, the air was breathable, the kind that carries the smell of thawing dust. They boiled water for noodles on a camping stove, steam curling toward the ceiling like incense. Eve ate in silence, too tired for conversation. "You think we can fix it?" she asked finally. Mara looked around, the cracked tiles, the leaning frames, the ceiling sagging just enough to warn of gravity's patience. "Maybe not all of it," she said, "but enough." 3 days passed. Snow softened to slush, then froze again. They found a rhythm: sweep, patch, rest, repeat. Eve claimed a room with blue wallpaper and painted over the water stains with leftover white from a rusted can in the cellar. Mara scrubbed the kitchen sink until the iron gleamed dull, but proud. On the 5th morning, a mail truck stopped at the end of the drive. A man stepped out, gray-bearded, uniformed, eyes kind. He studied the house, then the woman on the porch holding a hammer like a weapon. "Didn't expect to see smoke from this place," he said. "You folks moving in?" "Just keeping warm," Mara replied. He nodded slowly, like that was enough. "It's been empty since the Bancrofts passed. Folks around here call it the frozen house. Shame to see it rot." "Not frozen anymore," she said, half a smile on her lips. He looked at her for a long moment, then handed her a small brass key. "Mailbox still works. Figure you might as well have it." She took it, startled. "Thank you." "Name's Ellis," he said. "I drive this route every day. If you need something, anything, leave a note in the box." That night, she and Eve sat by the kitchen radiator. The light bulb overhead flickered but held. The warmth reached the edges of the room like a careful handshake. Eve leaned against her shoulder. "Do you think we'll get in trouble for staying here?" she asked. "Maybe," Mara said softly. "But for once, I'd rather be warm and wrong than cold and right." Eve giggled, the sound thin but real. Mara smiled into the dark. "Sleep, baby. We'll see what tomorrow wants." Tomorrow wanted progress. She found old paint in the cellar, stiff but usable after stirring. The color was strange, halfway between cream and sunrise. She painted one wall in the kitchen while Eve drew suns and hearts in the dust on the floorboards. The smell filled the air, sharp and alive. "Feels like it's breathing again," Eve said. "Maybe it is." As days stretched, the house began to reveal its secrets. Behind a broken wardrobe, Mara found a stack of letters tied with faded ribbon. The handwriting was elegant, fragile. One envelope unsealed itself as she picked it up. "Dearest A." It began. "The winter has been kind to no one, but the house still holds our laughter. Someday, when the world softens, I hope someone will find it and know we were happy once." Mara read the line 3 times. She slipped the letter back carefully and replaced the ribbon. Someone had loved here. That was enough reason to keep going. That evening, she shared the story with Eve. People used to write letters just to remind each other they existed, she said. Maybe we can do that, Eve answered. Leave letters for whoever comes next. Mara kissed her forehead. Maybe we will. By the second week, the house had become theirs, not legally, but emotionally, which is the deeper kind of ownership. The rooms no longer echoed, they hummed. The dust began to settle into corners respectfully. The air smelled faintly of paint, soap, and potatoes baking in foil on the stove. One night, when the temperature dropped below 0 again, a loud pop echoed through the walls. A pipe had burst in the hallway. Mara ran barefoot, twisting valves, wrapping towels, holding her breath until the leak slowed. Water pooled across the floor, freezing as it spread. Eve stood in the doorway, eyes wide. Is it broken? For now, Mara said, laughing weakly. Everything breaks before it gets better. They mopped together until the floor gleamed with its ordeal. Afterward, they sat wrapped in blankets, watching their breath fade in the faint heat that remained. Eve's eyelids fluttered. Mom, she murmured, I think this house likes us. Mara looked at the ceiling, where condensation glimmered like tiny stars. Then let's give it a reason to. A week later, Ellis returned with a thermos of coffee and a toolbox. Heard you've been fixing the old beast, he said. Trying to, Mara replied. She's stubborn. Aren't we all? He said with a grin. Mind if I take a look at that boiler? Together, they coaxed the machine into smoother breathing, tightening valves and clearing soot. When the heat spread evenly through the pipes, Ellis leaned back, satisfied. You've got a good touch, he said. Maybe this house just needed someone not afraid to listen. After he left, Mara stood in the doorway watching the snow fall softer now, as if even the weather had decided to be gentle. The mansion, once frozen, hollow, radiated quiet life. Eve was upstairs, singing softly to herself while arranging her drawings on the wall. The tune drifted down the hall, light and sincere. Mara closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she wasn't running or apologizing or waiting for permission to exist. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. The house creaked around her, not in protest, but in conversation. The heat clanged once in the pipes, steadying itself. Outside, the wind eased. Inside, warmth spread, patient and complete. She exhaled, long and even, and whispered to the walls, We're staying. The snow melted in slow confession. Roofs dripped. Gutters woke with little groans, as though surprised to still exist. The air outside the mansion no longer carried the bite of warning. It smelled faintly of thawed pine and mud, of life remembering itself. Mara stood on the porch, the morning sun touching the edges of her face. Steam rose from the old coffee mug in her hands. The cup had a chip shaped like a crescent moon. She had found it in the pantry weeks ago, scrubbed it until it stopped smelling of dust. Behind her, inside the house, Eve's footsteps tapped down the hallway, lighter now, almost musical. You're up early, her daughter said, rubbing her eyes. I didn't sleep, Mara replied softly. Too quiet. Too quiet is better than too cold, Eve said, grinning with the wisdom of 9 years and 1,000 miles of growing up too fast. Mara smiled. You're right. The house looked different now. It still sagged inside, but the size had changed. Less grief, more gratitude. Curtains hung again. A patched quilt draped over the couch. The smell of bread from yesterday's baking still lingered, warm even in memory. Ellis had returned twice since his first visit, each time with some small offering, a coil of wire, a can of paint, stories about how the Bancrofts used to host Christmas dinners for the whole county. "This place always had a good heart," he'd said. "It just forgot the beat for a while." Mara believed him. The mansion no longer felt haunted. It felt waiting. The first letter came in early March, a thin white envelope addressed to current resident Bancroft Estate. The handwriting was old-fashioned, elegant. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I heard someone has returned to the frozen house. My name is Clara Bancroft. I grew up there. If it's true, please let me visit." No address, just a phone number written neatly at the bottom. Mara folded the letter carefully and left it on the table, staring at it for half the afternoon. The house had belonged to someone once, someone who wanted to see it again. When she finally called, a woman's voice answered, fragile but warm. "You found it, didn't you?" Clara said, as if she'd been expecting this call all her life. My daughter and I are just staying for now," Mara said carefully. "I don't mind," Clara replied. "If the house let you in, it must like you. It never liked anyone who came for the wrong reasons." That weekend, Clara arrived. A silver car, slow up the drive. She stepped out wearing a thick green coat and holding a small tin box. Her white hair was pinned back with a clasp shaped like a leaf. Eve ran to open the door before Mara could stop her. "Come in, it's warm." Clara's eyes softened. "That's the first time I've heard those words about this place in 40 years. They gave her tea, served in the mismatched cups that had survived the house's long sleep. Clara moved through the rooms with reverence, her fingertips tracing banisters, door frames, wallpaper edges, as if reading Braille from her past. "I was 16 when my parents left," she said. "The pipes froze that winter. We couldn't afford the repairs. We sold the furniture, packed what we could, and never came back." She smiled faintly. "It was never the house's fault. We just stopped believing in it." In the parlor, she set the tin box on the piano. "This was all I saved." Inside were old photographs, sepia faces, summers in the orchard, a Christmas table heavy with candles, and one photo of a little girl standing beside a grand staircase, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "That's me," Clara said. "I used to hide under that stair during storms. I thought the house could protect me if I listened hard enough." Eve tilted her head. "Maybe it did. You're still here." Clara laughed softly. "Maybe so." Before she left, she handed Mara a folded deed and a small brass key. "The bank never claimed it back," she said. "Taxes paid until 97, then forgotten. Consider this, a gift. I don't need walls anymore, but you seem to." Mara stared, speechless. "I can't accept—" "You already did," Clara interrupted gently. "You kept it alive. That's worth more than money. Just promise me you'll fill it with people again." By April, the road thawed enough for visitors. Word spread quietly, the way good rumors do. Ellis told a teacher from the next county, who told a social worker, who told a young mother trying to escape a motel room she couldn't afford. The first night Mara opened the door to strangers, her hands trembled. A woman stood there, holding a baby, wrapped in an old scarf. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but steady. "I heard there's warmth here," she said. "There is," Mara answered. "Come in." She guided her to the kitchen, poured tea, stoked the boiler until the radiators hummed louder than the wind. Eve brought blankets. The woman sat by the fire and whispered, "I didn't think people like you existed." Mara smiled softly. "People like me? People who stay." After that, others came. A teenage boy who'd been sleeping in his truck, an elderly man whose trailer roof had caved under snow, a pregnant woman who said she just needed a week to breathe. They came quietly and left slowly. The mansion changed with them. The halls filled with footsteps and laughter that didn't echo anymore. The kitchen became a chorus of clinking cups and low conversation. Mara hung a small sign by the porch, handwritten in paint Eve mixed herself. "The warm house. Everyone deserves a door that opens." Clara visited again that summer. The house was alive now, windows open, curtains fluttering like lungs. She walked through the rooms, smiling, tears in her eyes. "I knew it would remember," she said. In the dining room, long planks had been pushed together to form one huge table. People sat shoulder to shoulder, eating soup, bread, potatoes from the small garden Mara and Eve had planted in the backyard. Eve waved at Clara. "We're having dinner for 12 today," she said proudly. 12, Clara repeated, eyes shining. "When I was young, this table was never full. I think it was waiting for this." She turned to Mara. "You've done what none of us could." Mara shook her head. "I just needed somewhere to stay." Clara smiled. "That's all any home ever needs. Someone who needs it back." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Mara stepped outside. The air was warm and heavy with the smell of lilac. The windows glowed with soft yellow light, each one a small promise fulfilled. She looked up at the sky, felt the breeze slide against her skin, and for the first time since losing everything, she didn't feel like she was borrowing time. She was living it. Autumn came gentle that year. The trees along the drive turned gold early, and the mansion wore their reflection proudly in its clean windows. One morning, a letter arrived addressed simply to the warm house. Inside was a check for $200 and a note. "For the nights I didn't freeze. You don't know me, but thank you." The signature was a first name only. Mara held the letter for a long time before tucking it into a tin box on the mantel. "We'll use it for the roof," she said to Eve. Eve, now taller, nodded like an adult. "And maybe curtains for the back room." "Yes," Mara said, smiling. "Curtains." More letters came. Small donations. Notes from people passing through. One had a photograph attached. 3 strangers standing by the porch, holding mugs of coffee, smiling in morning light. On the back, "Home isn't where you're from. It's where you stop running." The house began to breathe differently, lighter, freer. It had gone from frozen monument to living organism, and Mara felt herself changing with it. The lines on her face softened. The heaviness in her chest, once a constant companion, began to lift. In late November, the first snow returned. Thick flakes drifted down in silence, erasing footprints, covering the garden in white forgiveness. The boiler hummed strong and steady. Inside, the smell of cinnamon filled the air. They were preparing for what Eve called the house's birthday. 1 year since they arrived. A handful of guests sat around the fire. Ellis with his thermos. Clara wrapped in a shawl. The young mother and her baby, now walking. The teenage boy, now working in town, but still stopping by every week. Eve had strung paper snowflakes across the ceiling. "Everyone has to make a wish," she declared. Ellis lifted his cup. I wish for more hands to help and fewer reasons to need them. Clara smiled. I wish for walls that never go cold again. Mara looked at the fire, its flames reflecting in the glass of the old photographs on the mantel. She thought of the years behind her, the losses, the nights in the car, the fear that had once felt permanent. Then she thought of the house, alive again, because she'd refused to leave it cold. When it was her turn, she said, I wish that everyone who finds this place leaves a little warmer than they arrived. The group raised their cups. To warmth, they said in unison. That night, after the guests drifted to sleep, Mara climbed the staircase slowly. At the landing, she paused by the stained glass window they'd uncovered months ago. Moonlight poured through, painting the hallway gold and blue. She thought of her own mother, of the arguments, the silence that had followed, the years of absence. She took a deep breath and whispered, I forgive you. The words felt strange but right. The house seemed to listen. Somewhere deep in the pipes, a faint sigh echoed, like metal exhaling. Eve's door was half open. Inside, the girl slept, surrounded by paper snowflakes and dreams. Mara stood in the doorway watching her, heart full and calm. For the first time in a long time, she didn't fear tomorrow. In spring, the warm house became more than rumor. A local journalist wrote an article about the forgotten mansion turned community haven. Donations followed, a new boiler part, a shipment of blankets, even a second-hand generator. People began to come, not because they were lost, but because they wanted to help. Volunteers painted walls, patched the roof, built a ramp by the porch for an older guest. They planted rows of tulips and beans in the garden. Children played tag in the yard. The mansion that had once eaten light now reflected it. Mara stood by the porch one evening watching the sunset bleed through the branches. Eve stood beside her, hair blowing across her face. It's so bright, the girl whispered. Mara nodded. It's supposed to be. They watched the sun sink behind the trees, leaving the sky bruised with color. Inside, laughter drifted from the kitchen. Someone burning toast, someone telling a story. Mom, Eve said after a while, you think it'll always stay this way? Mara turned to her, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Nothing stays the same. But warmth, real warmth, has a way of finding its way back. Eve smiled, leaning against her. Then we'll keep finding it. Years later, the townspeople would still talk about that winter when the frozen house came back to life. They'd tell newcomers about the woman who arrived with nothing but her daughter and a broken car, and how she turned emptiness into shelter. They'd say that if you pass by the hill on a cold night, you can see the glow from its windows, steady, golden, patient, and if you stop and listen, you'll hear laughter, footsteps, maybe the sound of someone playing an old piano, its notes slightly off, but full of heart. Inside, on the mantel above the fire, the first letter from Clara Bancroft still rests in its frame beside a photograph of Mara and Eve. Below it, in careful handwriting, a plaque reads, The Warm House. Restored 2024. Because warmth belongs to everyone. One evening, long after the house had filled with new stories and new hands, Mara stepped outside alone. The air was cool, the last light fading. She could hear voices behind her, soft, content, woven with the house's breath. She walked to the edge of the porch and looked out across the yard where crocuses pushed through the soil. She thought of the day she'd arrived. Snow up to her knees, heart hollow as the wind, and felt gratitude rise like heat from a flame. The world hadn't given her much, but it had given her this: a roof that once froze and now glowed, a daughter who believed, a life made not from luck, but from staying. She whispered to the dusk, "We made it home." The windows answered in light. The mansion, no longer frozen, no longer forgotten, kept its promise, warm, steady, alive. And for the first time in forever, the night did not feel cold.